So the agenda, we'll do an introduction to boundary systems quickly, and then go right into information about surfacing Creo 4, what's new, and then demonstration. So boundary systems, we are a tech leader that we have partners with PTC, Solid Thinking, eTROS, ZWCAD also, and some of our capabilities include product lifecycle management, data management, CAD design and consulting, simulation, and product development. About boundary systems, we have been awarded the Inc. 5000 and Weatherhead on multiple occasions also. And we're also a Windchill certified implementer, a PTC preferred service provider, and a PTC certified training partner. Okay, so some solutions that we offer here come from PTC. So a standard thing that we're talking about here is Creo Parametric on a regular case, Solid Thinking, eTROS, and also ZWCAD. Okay, and again, I'm Joshua Fontana. If you have any tech questions for me, feel free to toss me an email, or sales-related questions, you can email sales at sales@boundarysys.com. Okay, so let's go over some of the new surfacing technology built into Creo 4. So Freestyle now supports the creation of multiple objects that are independent of each other. So you have the ability to divide a Freestyle object and work with each object independently, then connect or join those objects at a time. Okay, so you can also add new shapes at any time, and as the shapes are connected and joined, the shape count changes in the new Freestyle tree, as we see there in Figure 2. Okay, so we see multiple shapes here that are associated with each Freestyle shape here, as we see in Figure 1 and 2. And then again, as you connect those shapes together, it'll change the shape count in your Freestyle tree. Okay, next, again about Freestyle. So now you can import and export OBJ files directly into or out of Freestyle. So previously, you could import OBJ files, but they would come into Creo Parametric and you couldn't manipulate them with Freestyle. So now that you can import those directly into Freestyle, it allows you to leverage the control mesh that was in the OBJ previously. Okay, so there is a limit of 5,000 control mesh faces imposed to be able to manage the file efficiency and retain the desired flexibility. Okay, so you can also flip the normal direction of the control mesh of imported geometry. And next is using n-gon faces. So Freestyle has the ability to split quad faces into n-sided faces or n-gons. So previously you could only do quad faces, which are four-sided faces were allowed. So with the enhancements of n-gons, you now have the ability to create or modify control mesh faces to have less or greater than 4 edges. So this allows for more freedom and flexibility. So each added edge will break the 4-sided face into smaller faces, providing enhanced control, as we see there in Figure 1. So what we can also do, as we see in Figure 2, is delete those edges to further refine our control. So in Creo Parametric, we'll automatically delete vertices that are no longer needed after the edges have been removed. Okay, so Next, let's talk about some Freestyle usability improvements. So with Freestyle, there is now the old circular menu that used to be associated with Freestyle is no longer there. Now there's a standard right-click menu, as we see there in Figure 2. So that is fully customizable. So we can customize the right mouse button menu and add or subtract commands from it. And there's also new command shortcuts associated with Freestyle now. Okay, so let's talk about style now, just the regular style tool. So style now has a G3 connection to define new acceleration connections between curves, both for curve connections and surface connections. So it can be used with curve to curve, curve to surface, or curve to edge also. So this connection looks at the rate of change of the curvature across the boundary of the curve and provides more control and precise capability for you as a designer. So Figure 1 kind of shows that quite well, I think. So we see G1 where the curvature comes up and then there's a sharp change in curvature. And then G2, it's a little bit better where it actually has a connection there, but there's still a sharp change. Where G3, there's actual smooth change in between the curvature. So there is a new arrows associated with those two. So if we right mouse button on the arrow glyph as we see in Figure 3, we can change it from G1 to G3 as we need to. Or if we just keep on clicking on those arrows, on those glyphs, then we can change the connection as we need to. Okay, so next is another thing with the style tool is periodic and non-periodic closed curves. So style now allows the ability to create closed curves as periodic or non-periodic curves. So the closed curves will be defined as periodic by default and have no tendency or tangency control on endpoints. So periodic curves have no concept of start or end point and should be created to be as seamless as possible, whereas non-periodic curves are typically two halves of a curve, and then you have the ability to define the tangency between those two curves at that point. So you'll see here in the demonstration that whenever you're doing things like an extrude or something of that nature, so before, whenever you had non-periodic curves, you had to select both sides of that curve. So because it's broken into two individual curves, and with with periodic curves, it's just one seamless curve. So you don't have that multiple selection. Okay, and then next is the drop curve options. So style has the ability to drop a curve normal to a surface now. So with this new direction option, users can select the desired surface to drop the curve onto and then choose either along the direction or normal to a surface. So we see the two options there. So normal to the surface, so as the surface changes, then the normal changes also. So that may give you the desired effect that you're looking for. Rather than before, it was just along a specific direction and it dropped right down normal to that direction rather than the actual surface. And then with analytic geometry will now be maintained after the warp feature has been created. So geometry will no longer be approximated to splines that can cause downstream problems. Okay, so a planar surface is maintained as a planar surface when not impacted by the warp feature. So as we see here, the other features up here at the top of this vase in figure 1 are not affected by the warp feature. Okay, so again, if you have any questions, feel free to toss me an email. I'll also be answering questions at the end of the webinar and also sales related questions. So now let's go right into the demo portion of the webinar. So here we have this steering wheel that I was talking about. So here we have our Freestyle feature over here in a model tree. So I can easily edit definition that, and then our Freestyle tree comes up. So we see our two shapes there. So we can see that we can select them on individual. They'll highlight in the graphics window. And then we can easily connect these two shapes together. So I'll select a face over here, another face over here, utilize the right mouse button menu so we can see the right mouse button options here associated with that, and then connect those two faces together. So we see it dynamically changes our Freestyle tree over here. So now that it's connected, it is one shape, so it changes our count. So if I go ahead and add another primitive, so there's another Freestyle shape there, it adds another shape over in the Freestyle tree. So that's pretty powerful there, especially if you're a user of Freestyle. So next, let me talk about using the OBJs and the ngons. So I'm going to start off with a new file here. It's brand new. It has only the standard chords in there and datums. So I'll go ahead and create a Freestyle feature. And then I'll go to the standard shapes group and then import a mesh from there. So here's an OBJ file that I'm going to import. And then there's my options associated with that, so I can change the units if I want to, and also flip the normal direction. So as we see, I brought in that shape, that OBJ, right into Freestyle. And I have a control mesh associated with it, so I could easily select any portion of the faces or the edges or vertices and start manipulating them as need be. So I'm going to start off by getting rid of half of this control mesh by mirroring it. And I need to select a reference associated with that mirror. There we go. So now every time I manipulate one side, it'll manipulate the other. So here we see we have, let me change my view real quick. Here we go. So we can see this control mesh right here. They're all four-sided shapes currently. So I can add edges to these shapes as need be. So I'll go ahead and add some edges here. And then now I have these triangles inside of my control mesh. So if I want to get rid of some of these edges also, All I have to do is select them. I'm going to select multiple at the same time, and I'm going to delete just by hitting the delete key, or there's a right mouse button. So there's your delete option there. Okay, so now that I have that face there, I can go ahead and start manipulating that face appropriately. So I'll go ahead and split the face by 25%. And then maybe I'll extrude this face up. So notice, although again I'm utilizing the right mouse button menu quite a bit, I'll go ahead and extrude this up and then pull it down. Then I'll go ahead and split that face again. By another 10%, and then I'll drag that back up. Okay, so we're creating this button. So again, I want to add a sharp crease on this button, so I'll utilize the right mouse button menu to add that crease. Now, of course, you can come up here to the ribbon and utilize all the commands there as need be. So next, let's talk about the G3 connections, okay? So here we have this mirror. We want to analyze some of the surface connections here, okay? So I'll go ahead and go into this style feature and then do a curvature analysis. So I'll select these two curves here, or these two surfaces, and I can see a sharp change in curvature right here in between these two surfaces. So that's quite undesirable. So what I can do is go into this surface, and I can see here, if I just hover over the glyph, that I have a G2 continuity currently. So I can utilize the right mouse button and change it to G3. I can also just select them and it'll toggle through the options. So right there's G2, there's G3, and there's G1. And the arrow glyph does change its shape as the continuity changes. So then we'll select OK and rerun that analysis. So let's go back to the curvature and select the surfaces. So now we can see that the curvature there is much smoother, connecting those two surfaces together. Of course, you could also do reflection analysis to analyze that. So we see here in the reflection analysis that our stripes are very continuous in between our surface patches here, to let us know that we do have good continuity. Okay, so next let's talk about the non-periodic and periodic curves. So right now we have this style feature. So we'll go ahead and edit that definition and just kind of analyze how the curve is created. So right now we do have an endpoint and a start point of our curve. We can select that just like before and modify its tangency. Okay. So we'll go ahead and just accept this default. And let's say extrude. So we want to extrude on this surface and project this curve up. But we see it breaks this curve into two individual curves, as you can see as I'm highlighting. So I can select them on an individual basis and then extrude that shape as needed. But with a periodic, if I go back into this style feature, edit definition, and then change it to periodic, and then hit accept, then we'll see as I do my extrude that it highlights the entire curve for me. And I don't need to select them two because that is one continuous curve with no stop and start point. Okay, so next let's talk about the drop curve options. Okay, so we have this freestyle shape and this style curve up here that we would like to manipulate. So we'll go ahead and manipulate the style curve. And we see our drop curve option here. So we'll select what we want to drop it onto. And of course the curve to drop. So there it just drops it onto that surface with a long direction associated with the arrow here. So that could be desirable, or maybe if you want the shape of the curve that's being dropped to be normal to the surface, then we can just change the option for the direction. Now as the surface changes, the normal changes, of course, so it changes the shape of the curve that's being dropped. So the other option here that we could do, if I turn on some datums here, is I can project this up to an existing datum. So I'll utilize drop curve again, select the curve, and then the surface can be an existing datum. Okay, so that wraps up the demonstration portion. So one thing I will add is that if you want to go to our website at any point in time, we do have all of our webinars on our website. So if we go to the events here at the top, we have webinars there and hands-on workshops. We do have some hands-on workshops coming up. If you're interested, you could register for them. We have some Flow EFD workshops in Cleveland and Pittsburgh, and Creo 4 hands-on workshop in Cincy, Erie, Columbus, Louisville, and Cleveland. So feel free to register for those hands-on workshops. They are for free. And again, also we have the webinars associated with Boundary Systems. You can click and see our entire schedule of webinars. We have lots of webinars coming up. So I'll go ahead and take a look at the questions now and see what you guys have. Okay, lots of questions about having no sound. Okay. Okay, so one question here is, does G3 surfacing require all curves to be a G3 connection? No, it does not. So you could have a tangent connection on one side of your patch and then a G3 on another. So you can customize that as need be. And let me see if I have, yeah, let me pull this back up here and remodify this. So we see here we can have G3, and then over here we can have G2 without a problem. And it's kind of hard to see the difference between these unless you kind of look down the surface. So here we have G1, here is G2, and here is G3. So we can see the surface curvature change as we're changing that continuity. Good question there. So another question here is the PowerPoint. So yeah, I could make the PowerPoint available at the end of the webinar if need be. That's no problem. So another question here is, if I add a mid-curve on a four-sided surface, will the mid-curve remain G2 or G3? Okay. So I think what he's talking about is if I have another curve in between here, would that remain G2 or G3? So just like any other curve, so we have connections. These are just surface connections. But if I select the individual curvature, then I should be able to change the curve in between. So here are the four chains associated with this, as we see. And then the curvature in this direction also. So this is currently stated at normal. So if you added another curve in here, that would probably be part of, then you would be able to change the curvature in this direction and this direction of that curve, but in this direction it would just, you wouldn't have that control. I hope that answers your question. Oh yeah, so the boundary curves. So yeah, in this case, the boundary curves here do not have those connections. It would have to be, right now it's normal or G0 position. Okay. So it looks like that's all of the questions we have. I'll wait for just a little bit longer to see if there's any more. So this webinar will be shown in, we'll have it up on our website or in YouTube soon, so feel free to revisit it. Okay, I don't see anything else coming in, guys, so just want to thank you for your participation and for coming to the webinar. Again, feel free to contact me if you have any more technical questions, or if you have any sales related questions, you can contact sales. Thank you very much and have a good day.